Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again on this fine evening today. We have had a great session yesterday, and I'm sure the session today will be fully amazing. And before we begin, I would just like to let you know that in the previous session we spoke about the importance of learning Rust. Why you should learn Rust so as to learn substrate which will help you build in Polkadot. And I am seeing a hand here. Let me just check. Okay. Okay, yeah. So guys, if you have any questions, any doubts, just put it in the Q&A chat and we'll be fine. We'll try to answer you there then and there itself. Do not worry. We will be taking each and every question that you guys put in here. So I want to start with the session today. And before we begin, I have a small kind of a surprise for you guys, which is related to the quiz that happened yesterday. And we have, let me just, instead of saying, let me just show you. All right, so like you can see on my screen right now, these are the scores of the students of the top, these are basically the top scorers from yesterday's quiz, which is the session 1. And to tell you about the importance, I want to just bring in Praveen sir. I'm actually glad that he is here to audit the session, but I would really appreciate if you can come in and give us few thoughts on what the importance is, and that the people who could not make on the leaderboard, that they don't need to worry. Exactly, this is just the beginning. We are starting out, and to give a little more context to what we are trying to prove through this quiz leaderboard. Praveen sir, would you please like to add some few points here?
Yeah, thank you, Deepak, and good evening, all of you. What Deepak is showing right now is basically, what we saw in yesterday's quiz, and it's pretty interesting to see that after attending a couple of hours of session, many people, in fact, the list goes on. There are many people here who have scored 13 here, who have scored 12 here. I think I was pretty impressed by your performance. But then more importantly, I think this demonstrates your commitment. I would like to especially shout out Ritika Singh, Bharat Kalyan, Bhuvan, Dineshwar D, Rahul Krishna, Vuriti Venkata, Zahir, Vendra Janvi, and Kuna Paneni Sahiti. Now, what really you guys have done, like Deepak mentioned, this is just the beginning. And every day you will be, exposed to a new set of topics. Our expert trainer, Mr. Selvaraju, is also here. And my only request to all of you is that please participate in these sessions, with your 200%. And once you do that, the outcome will be exponential. You know what? I was reading somewhere, if you take 0.99 and then you kind of give power to that number, okay, and the outcome that you get, and if you do it 1.01 and then put a power to on top of that, the number is extremely different. So it's just a matter of putting those 0.02 extra and make it more than 100%. So I definitely would call on you to give your best and make it a learning experience. What we are doing, we will be showing this leaderboard every day in every session for the last quiz conducted. And I would encourage you guys to do your best during the session, be active, ask questions so that you understand the concept being taught and try to do well in the examination. I think this is going to accelerate your learning to a great extent. So many congratulations for all the people here who are appearing here on the board, leaderboard. I would love to have some of the people who are not here, they come in this leaderboard in the next class, today's quiz. But then, and I would encourage all of you 9 people here to retain your position. So I think let's see who wins it. And during this process, all of you win it. All of you become a leader in terms of your knowledge. So I think all the very best and happy learning. Thank you, Deepak.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of you come on the leaderboard, that would be the best outcome. Like every day the names change, because so the main aspect of this leaderboard, as Praveen sir has said, is to grab your attention towards the session, not just to not that you start taking it lightly, that okay, fine, the sessions are happening, we have nothing to lose, nothing is at stake here. At stake here is your knowledge. So we will appreciate that if you just focus on the entire session, ask questions, as Praveen sir has already covered. One important point I want to cover is, a lot of people are asking, can you show all the student score? I mean, that's irrelevant here, because we are just taking the top scorers, but everybody else will be getting their scores as well, so do not worry. You don't need to focus on the scores, you need to focus on the knowledge, and the scores will automatically, you'll be there in the leaderboard by yourself once you start focusing on the on the sessions. So without further ado, I would like to begin with today's session, and we have Mr. Selvaraju with us, our expert trainer who has been working with the students very closely on during the on-ground hack fests, and also as part of the IBC Continuous Education Program. He was not with us for a few sessions in the last CEP due to some health reasons, but I'm super glad that he is back, because he's hell of a speaker, and he really excites the best out of us. He makes the engagement so amazing that you would be hooked to your seats. Today's topic is basically strings in Rust, and more obviously. And I mean, you will be surprised to know that Salva sir can actually take a session on strings theory as well, equally good than what you'll be doing in Rust. I hope I'm not wrong, Silvazar, right?
Yeah, I think the participants would be the best judge of that.
Okay, sir. Over to you, sir. Please, I'll stop my sharing my screen. Please begin the session. Thank you.
Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So let me share my screen. I hope I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. Sharing my screen. Right. So let me start out. Let me just, I need to share my audio as well, right? So let me just also share sound. Okay. Right. Okay then. So today we are going to discuss about variables and constants. We'll have loops. We'll be having discussion on loops along with functions, and there's a small assignment as well. I would request, everyone that you try these assignments out, okay? But you see, the whole point is that until and unless you practice and burn your fingers with the technology, you are never going to be comfortable enough to do stuff on your own. Okay, so that's very, very important. Of course, at the end of this, there will be some amount of discussion on strings, but we'll be having a separate dedicated session on strings. The reason being, the way strings are handled in Rust is completely different from what you are actually used to. So there are a lot of concepts to be learned as part of this thing. Okay. Now, one of the important things about discussion on variables and constants is that the way you see, or if you're done programming in, let's say, C, C++, or any other programming language, okay, what Rust does is that even though C, C++ are also low level, intermediate sort of level languages, Rust is a much lower level language. So actually, it has a lot of things implemented which are quite different from what you are normally used to. For instance, what we call as variables cannot be mutated. That means the values of the variables cannot change, and this is something that you're not used to. So mutability and immutability are something that go hand in hand, and they are part of the core behavior of the language itself. Now, this is not something that you would be used to if you're coming from a regular programming language. Now, the reason being that what Rust does is that it actually, brings in the best of, so many different things so as to make this language as robust as possible, as error-free as possible, so that, when you're writing system software using this language, okay, you don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty nuances, like, for instance, memory management and all those kinds of things. Okay. So, for example, I'll give you a simple example. Like, for instance, you will also see something called as move semantics, okay, and ownership model. Now, these are part of the core language in Rust, whereas it's available in C++, but actually in C++, it's not part of the core language. So, move semantics, if you want to implement, you will have to use the standard template library, which provides all these. So, all the best practices from these libraries and stuff have been brought in as core features within the Rust language. That's what makes Rust stand out. Okay. So these are the basic topics that we're going to talk about. So you will see a small assignment, and I would, encourage everybody to try these out. And yes, as far as possible, try it out without taking or without, Googling for, solutions. That actually, defeats the whole purpose of learning. Then in that case, it doesn't become learning. It is just copying. Okay, we don't want you to do that, because tomorrow you want to bring or develop your own product. then obviously you will have to come up with solutions on your own. So it has to become part of your practice as well as thought process. Okay. Right. So we'll be talking about the constants first, variables, constants, and immutability. These concepts. And in case if you have any doubts, please feel free to put it up in the Q&A. I can even pause. And Deepak Chaudhary with us is there in the background. He is actually checking out the Q&A. And whenever he says, we will pause the video, and then you can all look into the or we can discuss these queries of yours. Okay. Right. So let me just play this video for you guys. Maybe I'll just maximize the screen. Oh, it's offering a lot. Understood. So suppose, for instance, if I have a variable, let's say let n is assigned 99, and I just print it out. Okay. And in fact, so value of n is, and then we put a curly braces here as a placeholder and give it n, save this, and do a cargo run. Value of n is 99. There's another way of doing it. If you have the variable, you can actually inject the variable name itself in here. Okay, you can do it like this as well. If I do a cargo run in here, okay, it's still displayed. Okay, so if you have the variable names known to you, you can directly inject that in the placeholders, and the value will appear. That is one thing. Okay, now what I do is I want to increment this to 100. So let's say I do it like this. When I say n is assigned n plus 1, and display it. Now the moment I save, I start getting squiggly lines. So it says, hey, cannot assign twice to immutable variable n. So let me just show you in here. So cargo run. Okay, there you start seeing this error. First assignment to n, so let n is 99, that's fine. Help consider making this binding mutable n, because the problem is when you start to change the value, it says cannot assign twice to immutable variable. Now this is where Rust is quite different in terms of working when it comes to programming languages. Okay. Now variables in Rust are immutable. Okay. So one important aspect that you have to understand in Rust is immutable. Okay. Immutability means that you cannot change the value of a variable. Okay. You cannot change the value of a variable. So which means that calling it variable itself is a misnomer of sorts, right? That's true. So what actually happens is that Rust has this built-in mechanism for memory management, and also to make this code as error-free as possible. So suppose, for instance, if you need a variable that needs to change its value, okay, during the lifetime of the program, then in that case, you cannot use just let n, it will not work. Instead, what you will have to do is, you'll have to say, hey, you have to tell the compiler, hey, you know what, I'm creating a variable, but I want this not to be immutable, but mutable. So you have to add the mute keyword in here. That's MUT. And now you see that the error is gone, And in fact, if I come back to the terminal and run the code, so first the value is 99 and now it has become 100. Okay. So you have to be explicit. So what is the difference between a variable which is immutable and a constant? So you might ask, okay. So if you want to create a constant, you can always do so. Okay. So you can just say const, okay, and then give the variable name. So let's say I call this as pi sine 3.14. So if you do it like this, then what happens is here you can see this. It says by syntax error missing type for constant or static. Okay. So whenever you define constant for a variable, you need not mention the data type. It will get inferred by the compiler. But whereas in case of a constant, okay, you have to provide a value. So I will say F32. Save this. Now you still see errors. So it says C here. The mutable variable reference pointer mute can be used in several situations. The first is mutable variables, which can be used anywhere. You can bind a value to a variable name, some examples, and so on. Okay. So mutable variable reference or pointer. Okay. So what is happening is, if you want to use a const, okay, compile time evaluable functions. Okay, other uses of const keyword is used to raw pointers in combination with mute. Okay, turning a function into constant function, right? Constant values. For more details on const, you can use the Rust book. So you can actually check in the Rust book also. So let me just show you here. Let's search for so there it is, constant. So when you define a constant, what you have to do is you have to use the name in uppercase letters. That's the convention. You have to follow that. So the mistake that I made was, which was actually deliberate. So I'll change this name from pi to pi all caps. Okay. Now, I've not made use of this value, so it's never used. So that's just a warning. So whenever you create constants, you have to take the name in uppercase only, all uppercase. Okay. And if you have multiple words in it, so you have to use the snake casing by putting up underscores in between, right? This is one thing. So if I take an immutable variable, okay, and I take constant, then what is the difference? So essentially, you can think of it like this. So let's say I define another variable, okay, area, let radius is assigned say 2.5, something like this. Let's say let area is assigned this pi times radius times radius, as you can see here. And if you save it, that error will be gone. And area is not used, so I'll just print it out. Okay, client area of circle with radius, and I can use the name itself, is area. Save this, and let's go to the terminal and run this and see. Works fine. So, and if you have an immutable variable, which is basically sort of a constant, it's sort of a constant, not exactly constant. So what is the fundamental difference? The fundamental difference is, basically what will happen is that if you create a constant pi with this value 3.14, what the compiler will do is that wherever it finds pi, it is going to inject that value, and in fact in your object code or basically the executable, there is no such symbol by the name pi. Everything has been replaced by the value that actually provided. That's one difference. Second difference is that, okay, when I'm creating the variable like this, even if it is a mutable or immutable variable, so okay, let it be here, and I define a variable like this. I can also define a variable like this and say let, okay, x, and then I say x is assigned 55. Okay, so it has inferred. Now variable x is say here it is assigned to but never used. Okay, so for this you have to add the annotation unused variables. Okay, and then in here the value assigned to x is never read, so that is another warning. Okay, so that shouldn't be a problem. So if it is a variable, you can just declare the variable, not define it, and then you can do an assignment. Okay, and then you can do an assignment. Whereas with constant, an assignment is necessary. So whenever you define a constant, you have to, you know, define these. I mean, provide the value. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. Okay. Whereas for regular variables, even if they are immutable, also you can just give declare them like this, and then finally give an assignment. So it will actually wait for the first assignment to happen. So let me just add this unused verse. So hello unused. Okay. Here it is never used, so that's fine. It's never read. So if you just put it in some expression, it will work just fine. And now if I did something like this, okay, so let's say I do it like this. X is assigned 88. Okay. And if you share this, you will start getting error in the entire statement. See, cannot assign twice. So the first assignment is accepted. That's because you did not initialize it. Okay. Right. And the second assignment will fail because it's an immutable variable. This is a subtle difference if you're coming from a regular programming language, and you have to keep that in mind whenever you are actually using this. Okay. Okay, guys. So, any questions? So let's see the question. It's all about scores only. Okay. Okay. The video is blurred. Someone is saying so. Actually, these are available on the YouTube channel, so you can go and watch it at higher resolution. If I put higher resolution here during the presentation, so there is a lot of buffering. Okay. So I think it was somewhat readable, right? Okay. So any questions here, please?
Sir, we have a question from yeah.
Yeah. So Shiv Kumar is saying, sir, all variables are immutable. Then what is the use of const? Right. So that's what. So when you know the difference between these two is that constants would mean that these are predefined values, right? And the mutability or immutability of the variable is that you know that you're going to use certain symbols in your code, but you do not want to initialize it at the point of declaration. You can do it later in the code by declaring it in the beginning. Okay, that is something that you cannot do with const, right? So you can do one single assignment to an immutable variable if it has not been initialized, it has just been declared. That's the difference. Okay. Right. Any other questions, please? Also, because during the compile time, what happens is the compiler only knows that you have a symbol over there, but during the runtime, it will be retrieved. Whereas the constant, these symbols, okay, they are folded into the code itself, and wherever the constant appears in the expression, the actual value is placed. So therefore, in your executable code, let's say, for instance, we spoke about the the constant pi, right? The pi does not exist in the executable code at all. In fact, wherever we have used pi in our code, okay, it will be actually replaced by the actual value. You can think of this constant like a hash defined macro in C or C++. Okay, so these constant values, they get replaced, okay, into the expressions in the entire program. So the executable code doesn't have that symbol. In fact, it only has those values. Okay. Any other question, please? Okay, so Abdul Ikram is asking. Okay, so I think his answer has been he has been answered. Okay, right. So let's go ahead and talk about loop. Okay, so let me just play this video for you. We will talk about loops. Right. So loops in Rust come in three different flavors. There is a loop statement. Okay, there is a loop statement. There is a while statement, and there is a for statement. Okay, so these are the loops which we actually use in. Now, loop is, if you see here, it's actually an infinite loop. Okay, whereas while is a conditional loop, and for is a iterator loop. So all these are three different flavors. Okay, and probably the most loops you will see would be in the form of either while or for. Loop is also used, but because loop inherently is an infinite loop, so you need to ensure, okay, so ensure the use of break statements to terminate the loop at some point. Okay, that's very essential. So otherwise, this will become an infinite loop, and it will go on and on and on and on and on. Right? Okay, so what we will do is we will take a simple example of generating, multiplication tables. So generate multiplication table. Yes, different rows. Okay. So first, let's take the loop statement. So let's say I have a value called okay, let n is assigned. Let's say I want to generate the mathematical table for 5. Okay. So I'll just create a counter. So because counter has to run from 1 to 10. So okay, yes. So just a small instruction. When you see when I typed let n and then equal to 5, right? This colon and then I32 came automatically from the language server. So it is just inside the editor, okay, but it's not in the code. Okay. So in the editor, automatically whatever the inference of the data types is happening, that is being displayed. So that's why it has a different background. Okay. So this is not that I have typed. So this is actually a feature from the extensions that in language server that we have installed. Okay, and that is the Rust analyzer. Okay, in the Visual Studio Code. So it has to be mutable counter and it starts with 1. Okay, and you say loop, and what I'll do is I will display the value. So incline I have number and let's say multiplied by number equal to. Now see, in the last placeholder there is an expression coming, so therefore I cannot put expressions inside that string format string. Okay, so I have n and I, or maybe I should just make it as I. And n times I. Okay. And also I need to increment the value. So I is assigned I plus 1. And then I need to check. Okay. So if I is greater than 10, break. Okay. Or exit early from a loop. That's fine. So let's come back up here and run this. What happened is, oh, sorry, I need to place it in curly braces. Right. See there? So we get this. So you have to ensure that you make use of the break statement, okay, in order to break the loop at some point in time. This is your loop statement. Okay. Now, if I were to do the same thing with the while, okay. So let's say I'm just comment this out. Using a while loop. Again, I say let n is 5. let the table I is assigned 1, and then I write this. While I is less than equal to 10, okay, and then so what I'll do is I'll just quickly take the statement. And I can also write compound assignments like this, I plus equal to 1, which is I equal to I plus 1. So save this and let's run this and see. Right. Okay. Oh, parentheses are not needed. So if I put it gives me warning, hey, you know what, you don't really need these parentheses. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Anyways, there you go, right? Okay. Now, if I want to use the for loop, then it will look like this. So I'm going to comment this out as well. Now, as far as for loop is concerned, it uses what is called as ranges. Okay. So I have let n is 0.5. Okay.
Hello, Silva sir.
And
Yeah.
Can you stop this?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one doubt, like anonymous attendee. It is saying that it should be 10. Where it should be 10? Anonymous attendee.
I should be 10.
Yeah.
I equal to 10. So who is this actually? What exactly do you mean by this? Understand.
Yeah, that is why I'm also not able to understand.
Your question itself is ambiguous. Could you be more precise, please? Can you rephrase your question, please? Okay, Deepak, we'll continue. So,
Yeah.
because the question itself is not clear, so we can't answer it.
No, it is int I equals to 10. Can you please going backward in the video?
Yeah. I think probably he is talking about the line 46 here.
I think yes.
Yeah, so it can't be.
Okay, let's continue. I'll solve this out in comment. Oh.
For n, sorry, I in, it's a range, okay? And then I can write whatever value I want. So I can just take the print statement and put it here. Okay. And I don't need to increment that because it automatically takes the value. However, there is one little catch though. Okay. So let's check this out. It only displays up to 9. That's because a range 1 to 10 defines a range, okay, which starts from 1 and then goes all the way up to, but not including 10. So this is called as inclusive exclusive range. That means the last value is actually excluded. If you want to include this inside of the range, all you need to just put an equal to symbol there. This makes it inclusive range. So if I do it now, there you go. Okay. Right. Okay, so let's say I want to take this number n, okay, as an input. So what I can do is I can say use stdio, and we want to take the n as an input. So what we can do is, so you see the previous case, what we've done. So we take the index, and if you see the index, it's actually defined as a string because it will always be a string, whatever is input from the standard input. Okay, so let so, and it has to be mutable because it will change, right? So mutable put is find string new. Okay, and then say you std in, okay, dot read line and pass in our, like we're done. So, but it also has to be a mutable reference in there. Okay, so sorry, I always have this issue. Reference to a mutable. Okay, and we also need to use dot expect. Reading value. Okay. And generally, what we do is we just, and now what you do is you take this input and you parse it into, so our n for our n, what we do is we take, so we take the index and then trim it and then parse it and then also do an expect so that the parsing actually gives you the right result. Okay. So I have input dot trim dot parse dot expect. And since we want to do a parse, so we need to define the exact data type so that the Rust compiler knows what type to pass it into. So this is something that you have to keep in mind. Okay, right? Because if you see the parse, okay, it will return a result type with some function and then string, right? Okay. So now if I here I can display and okay. Instead of print line, I'm using print so that the cursor stays on the same line. Okay. So I will run. So if I give, let's say 10, And we get 10 times 1 is a. So this is the way to do it. Okay, so I did see that some of the people are having screen clarity issues. Okay, so I will do a direct demonstration of it. Okay, so nothing to worry about. So now, if you have any questions related to loop, okay, so please come up with that. And also, let me just so if you have any questions, please put them up related to loop, and we will discuss that before we go on to the function. Any questions, please? So can you see my screen? So you can see all the code in here. Okay. Okay. For the multiplication table. Now you can see here. Okay. We are taking an input from the user. Okay. So how do you do that? So yesterday we just started it, but we did not finish it all. So essentially, whatever input you take, okay, you have to declare that variable as mutable because you're going to create a new string. So to create a new string, we use this string new okay function to create a new string. So string is a data type here. Okay, string is a data type in here, right? And this is so yeah. So please put up in the Q&A. I don't see any new questions coming up. If you have any questions related to loops, please let me know. So what we do is we are also using the IO library. So if you see, so we are using here using use stdio, okay, from the standard library. And what we are doing is that we are using from the IO library, we are calling the stdin function, okay, and on that object we are actually running the readline function. So readline takes in the variable into which the input that you're giving from the standard input needs to go. So we are passing in a reference to that. So anyway, so don't worry about the syntax. For now, just take the syntax as is, because in the functions part, you will actually understand what this ampersand mute actually means. It's called as a mutable reference and why you need to do it like that. Okay. And since the readline returns, it also expects that you have to put up error handling code. So that's what this dot expect is doing. Okay. So what we are trying to say, is that take the input. So once we have read it in the input, okay. So we are saying, hey, from the IO library, access the stdin object, and on that object, read a line and put it in the variable called input. And if something goes wrong, you say you need to display this error message. This is what this whole line says, whole statement says. Okay. Right. Okay. So Bhuvan, you're asking break continue, pass, conditions here. Yeah, you can use break and continue. You don't have a pass like you have in Python. Okay. And also, Abdul, you're asking, is expect line optional or mandatory? Okay, so there are two ways to handle it. So for now, since our main function is not returning a result type, so actually there is a type called as result. Okay, so since we are not returning a result type, so we have to explicitly use this expect over here. So we will be talking about this IO, and I will point you out to the right place in the reference wherein you can actually check what kind of, how to avoid this expect and instead use the result enum itself. So we'll be talking about that a little bit. Okay. So for now, assume that this is required. Okay. Now once you are through with this statement, what will happen is whatever you typed on the standard input, that will come in here. Okay, it will be stored in the variable input. However, this input variable is actually a string, right? So that string needs to be converted to a number. Okay, so what I want to do is, so what you do is you take the input, okay, variable, and since it's a string, so you can call the trim function. Trim function will remove the leading and trailing spaces, white spaces. Okay, so that you have only exactly the strings without any leading and trailing spaces. Once they are removed, then we need to parse it. So by parsing, you are taking a string and converting it to the data type that you want. And if that parsing fails, okay, so you need to provide an expect again here, saying that hey, the parsing has failed. Okay, but then because you are using parse, you're not saying what data type you want to parse it into. Okay. So therefore, when you declare the variable n here, you have to explicitly mention what data type it needs to be. So when you say I32, so the parse function knows, oh, fine. So because the variable n is declared as integer, 32-bit integer, it will parse this string into a 32-bit integer. And then you will have a 32-bit integer sitting over here, and then this for loop. Okay. Right. Any question here, please? Now, you might be thinking, oh my God, this is so difficult because in Python, I can just use input and then convert. And yeah, that's true. Because you see, those are higher level languages. Okay. And when it comes to Rust, the input and output, particularly from the standard input and output, okay, or for that matter, even from a file also, it is a low level operation. So it will have a little bit of more complexity because like what these complexities are there in the other languages, but the language hides away these details. So you only have higher level functions, okay, which hide away all the inner details. Whereas in case of Rust, that's not the case. So you have to keep that in mind. Right. Any other question, please? I see one more question in there. Start explaining about trim. Yeah, trim would mean if you are taking, let's say, if your string has got any spaces before and spaces after. Okay, something like say for instance, there is let's say let me just open up the terminal. Okay. So if you happen to type say 1, 2, 3 like this, it will be passed into an integer. But if you happen to say type some spaces and then 1, 2, 3 and then some spaces, what the trim will do is that it will take this and then remove all the leading space, this one, and the trailing space. Okay, so what you will be left with is only this one, this part. This is what the trim function does. So before you pass, there should be no leading trailing spaces. okay, that can actually mess up the parsing. So that's the reason why we need to use the trim in order to remove any spaces before and after the actual numbers that you're typing. Guys, there's one request there. Please, if you want to put up any questions related to your quizzes or certificates or anything of that sort, please go on the Discord, not here. Okay. So because that has been discussed at length yesterday itself. Now the Q&A, please keep it targeted only towards the session. And not related to your certificate or participation in anything of that. Okay. So I hope that answers the question about trim. Is there any other question, please? Please feel free to ask questions. Okay, so let's continue then. So let's talk about functions. So this is again from the previous session, okay, which was conducted. So let me just show you here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, for now, comment this out. Okay. So first off, do you want me to increase the font size? I can increase the font size for your convenience. I think this should be good. Okay. So what exactly is function? So function is just a named block of code that returns a value. That's it. And I know all of you really know functions, what these functions really are, right? Okay. So function is nothing but a block of code which can be reused again and again, again and again, so that you don't have to actually repeat the code, but instead you can just call them wherever you want. There's the whole point behind that. Okay. And we do have the concept of procedures in Rust. Now in C, C++, Java, and all, all blocks of codes are actually all are functions. There is no distinction between function and a procedure. But if you go back, to other languages of yesteryear, like for instance, Fortran, COBOL, Pascal. In fact, the Visual Basic also has this concept. So you have a function and a procedure. Both are named blocks of code. Name means, a function has a name, right? Like for instance, whatever functions that you're using in your code, like say for instance, if you're coming from C or C programming background, you call a function called say printf. Okay, printf is a very commonly used function, or scanf. These are functions. The printf or the scanf becomes the name of the function, right? Okay. So, and what is that function? What is that function? It's actually a block of code, right? Which is what even you write as part of the user-defined function. Now, the concept is pretty simple. So in C, C++, and Java, there is no distinction between function and procedure. Everything is, every named block of code is a function. But yesterday's programming languages, as I mentioned, COBOL, Fortran, Pascal, and all, they had this this distinction. So a function is something that returns a value. Okay, it's a named block of code which will return a value. Whereas a procedure is a block of code which does something but doesn't return any value. That's the only difference. Okay. So as you can see here, the procedure, it's a name block of code that will do some work but does not return a value. Okay. So here we have a function called welcome. So how do you define a function? You just use the fn keyword followed by the name of the function and then put a set of parentheses. This is how you define a function. Okay. And then within the curly braces, this part is called as the body of the function. Okay. Which is where the actual code goes in here. So it actually displays, it simply prints, welcome to Rust programming, right? Now function can also take an argument. So let's do one thing. Let's start off small. Okay. So you define a function welcome, and how do you use this? You have to call the function by its name. So how do you do that? So in our main function, what we are doing is we are calling the welcome function. So it looks at the code and sees whether there is a function by this name welcome or not. It is here. Okay. And then it runs the code. Okay. So let's save and run this and see. There you go. It says welcome to Rust program. Okay. Importantly, there's another thing. So a function can also take an argument. Okay. So what we do is we can say, hey, just saying welcome to Rust programming, we don't want that. Instead, what we want is that somehow I should be able to say what it should print. Like for instance, I have a welcome user, and what it does is it takes in a string, and also it takes in a number, and it says, hey, you know what? It is taking in the string, so therefore it is going to display that hey, you are welcome, and then followed by the name of the user, and then the age of the person. So the second argument is name, age, and also it is just like you will be so many years old next year, and so that is nothing but age plus 1. So when you want to pass input into the function to process, okay. So what you do is we define a function like this. So this is our function that takes an argument. Okay, but it does not return a value. So it's actually also a procedure only. It is also a procedure because it is not returning a value. Okay, so how do you pass input into the function? So to pass an input, that is where this whole parenthesis that you're seeing here, set of parentheses, inside that you have to give the parameters in here. Okay, and these are the arguments that are passed in for the name and for the age. Okay, so it is taking in a name and it's taking in an age. Okay, a name is a string, so we use ampersand str, sometimes also pronounced as stir. Okay, so this is actually a string slice. Okay, so don't worry about it. We'll have a complete discussion on strings. Okay, coming up later in the next session. Okay, wherein you will have a deeper understanding of what this string slice is really all about. Okay, so the first argument is the name, and the second argument is the age. And when you define these, you have to explicitly give the type annotation for the function. Okay, function parameters, that is necessary. Okay, so when the compiler checks the function call, it will actually check whether you are actually using the function call in the right manner or not. Okay, right? So it will have to check so whether the first argument is a string and the second argument is an integer or not. Right? So this is how we use functions that take in arguments. So this is basically the input that is going into the function. So now let's run this and see. Okay. So welcome John Doe. You are 25 years old. You will be 26 years old next year, right? So this is function that takes in an argument. You can also define a function that actually doesn't take in an argument, but returns a value. So how do you return a value? Now, there are multiple ways of doing that actually. Okay. The first one is using the return statement. That is what you are used to in other programming languages. So I have a function called test, and what it does, it returns an integer. Okay, 32-bit integer. So when you want a function to return a value, what you have to do is after the function name and the parenthesis, you put an arrow and then you say, hey, this is the return type. Okay, so how do you read this? You say it's a function called test, which doesn't take any argument and returns a 32-bit integer. And how do you return a value? Simply use the return keyword, okay, followed by the whatever value, 32-bit integer. Okay. And so if I call this test inside a print line macro also, okay, the value will be returned and it will be injected into the placeholder, and you should be able to see. Okay. However, a function can return a value using what is called as the tail expression. Okay. Using a tail expression. In this case, we are having a function called test2. This is the second version of test, which again returns a 32-bit integer. And all you need to do is, if you want to return a value, simply write the value as the last, okay, statement in the function. But very, very, very importantly, you should have just 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't put a semicolon here. The moment you put a semicolon here, all hell will break loose. Okay, so save this, you will see squiggly lines coming up, and then mismatch type I32 found, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so basically this error is coming because the moment you put a semicolon, it does not become, it is no longer a tail expression, it is a statement. Okay, it's a statement which needs to be executed. There is no such statement by the name 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that is the problem. So you need to remove this and save it again. Okay. Of course, test2, it is saying that it is never used, so that's fine. You come here and then uncomment this. And there's that. Okay, so now let's run this code and save. You see, the first test function is returning 5 and test2 is returning 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So this works just fine. Right? Okay. So if you have any doubt, please use the Q&A. Okay. And I can interrupt in between. Deepak is there looking at your question. Okay. So far we are returning value, but we're not taking in any input. Okay, that is no argument. So now here, even or odd. So this is a function that takes an input. That is, it has got parameters. Okay, and what it is doing, it is actually returning a string. Okay, it's returning a string. Right now, how do you return a string? So when you want to return a string like this, okay, UTF encoded, drawable string, and so on and so forth. Anyway, don't worry about this. So to return a string type, okay, not a string slice. String slice is ampersand str. Okay. So how do you check whether it is even or not? You just take the modulus of 2. If it is equal to 0, then it's an even. Otherwise, it's an odd. So as you can see here, what I'm doing from the if, I'm just returning this value. So it's just an expression. Okay. Here also you have an expression. So how to return a string type? So what you do is you say string and then from, and this is double colon, okay, which will actually call in a function from the string library. Okay, string data type. On this class, string is it's not a class, but it's actually a type. So string type has a from function. Okay, which takes in a hard-coded string and it will return a string object. Okay, now we can test this out even or odd, and we will test out both these conditions for 5 as well as 10. So even or odd, so that returns a string and that will be injected in. Okay, so let's go. Yeah, there. 5 is odd, 10 is even. Okay. 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 If there are any questions at this stage? Any questions, please? Deepak, did you see any additional questions?
No, sir.
Okay. The language server actually.
We have a question, sir.
What is that? Can you say arrow function again? No, no, no. This is not an arrow function. Arrow function is a completely different thing, and you don't have arrow functions in what to say, Rust. Okay, arrow function is a concept that is there in JavaScript. Okay. Okay. So let me go on. Okay. Right. So it's not an arrow function. Let me tell you. If a function is returning a value, right? If it is C or C++, what do? You give the return type at the beginning, right? Isn't it? It's the same concept. The only thing is, instead of saying int here on the left side, you say it on the right side and you put an arrow there. So arrow means that this function test will return some value which is of type int 32. Is that clear? Abdul, is it clear? It's not an arrow function. Again, remember, don't use that phrase. It simply means when you're putting in the function, when you put an arrow and then give a data type, it means that this function will return a value of that data type. Like for instance, we are writing the function test, and we are saying that it is going to return a 32-bit integer. So to mention that it is going to return something, you use this arrow symbol. Okay, right. Any other question? Okay. So now here we have a function. So let me just show these functions which have been written here, even or odd. This time our even or odd function is not returning anything. Instead, it is actually doing a print. Okay. So whatever value is passed, that needs to be a 32-bit integer. We are testing for this data type. Okay. If the modulus of x or whatever number is 0, it means that it's an even value. So it will print even. Okay, say the value is even, so on and so forth. And if the condition fails, it will display that this is odd, right? That's one thing. Now, you can also say, for instance, I want to pass in a tuple with 2 elements, and I want to get the sum of these 2 elements. So I'm just showing the tuple syntax. So actually, it can actually take a tuple. So how do you pass in a tuple? So to pass in a tuple, what you say, a t, okay, t is some tuple, okay, this is simply the parameter name, and then this is the tuple syntax, okay, tuple type annotation. So you're saying, hey, I want t is a tuple which has got 2 32-bit integer values, and it returns a 32-bit integer value as a sum. So how do you take the sum of these 2 values? Simply say t dot 0 plus t dot 1. T dot 0 would mean the first value in the tuple. T dot 1 would mean second value in the tuple, which is what we've seen yesterday. And simply add these 2. Now, since again, remember, this is a tail expression. Okay. It's a tail expression. So whatever expression you write, that becomes the return value. Okay. So here it's taking a tuple and it is returning an integer. Okay. And this function, capitalize, what it does is that it takes in a string, okay, name, and also returns a string. And what does it simply do? Basically, what it is doing is that it is actually taking the name and then to uppercase. It is converting it to uppercase, okay, and then returning that value. So uppercase is a function, okay, according to the terms of the Unicode derived definitions and examples like this. So basically, whatever value you have passed in, okay, whatever string is passed, it will give you the uppercase of that string, and that is what will be returned. Okay, so right. So let's see. So first off, okay. So first off, so what we are doing is even or odd, and first we will only use this. Okay. So we pass in the string. We take the value of n, and then we are displaying the value of n, and then we are calling the function even or odd and passing in the value of n. What it will do? It will print whether the value is even or odd, right? And then again, after calling the function, we are displaying the value of n. Okay. Now, let me run this code. Don't worry about those are all warnings. Okay. So value of n is 55, and 55 is odd. And after calling the function, the value of n is still 55. So nothing has happened. So n is still safe. Okay. No issues around. Okay. Now, if you take tuple, okay. So we are calling the function. Okay. So we are taking a tuple with 10 and 5, and then we are displaying the tuple. So how do you display a tuple? Tuple is a compound type, right? So therefore, you cannot use empty curly braces as placeholder. You have to use colon and then question mark, which is basically a debug string. Okay. And then we say, okay, the total is, so when you call the function passing in the tuple, what will happen is its sum will be returned. So sum will be stored in the value in the variable total. So we are displaying sum of the tuple elements. Sum of the tuple elements is, and then we are saying total. And then after calling the sum function, again we are displaying the tuple. Okay. Right. So let's run this and see. Okay. So the tuple is not changed. The tuple is still 10 and 5. So before calling the function, also it is 10 and 5. And you see, some of the tuple elements is sustained. Okay, it's coming out all right. Okay, now so we are creating a string. So how do you create a string? So we are creating a string called username. Okay, so to create a string using a string literal, all you need to do is simply say string from and then pass in a hard-coded string, and then you can display the username. Now we are passing in the username. Okay, okay, into the username in capital. So we are passing the username into the capitalized function. Okay, so that means I should be able to see ABCD all caps, right? Let's see that. Okay, so username is ABCD and the username in capital is ABCD all caps. Is what is expected, because our function, what is it doing? It is taking in the name and it is returning the uppercase of that. Okay, but I deliberately actually commented this out. So after calling capitalized function, username is, suppose I want to check. Okay, after calling capitalized function, username is, now I am seeing squiggly lines here. It's actually an error. It says borrow of moved value username. Okay, value borrowed here after move, and it's actually an error. It's actually an error. Okay, now this is something that you have to keep in mind. Okay, now as far as as far as the integer was concerned and tuple was concerned, nothing happened. But when it came to string, okay, you start seeing something strange. Okay, you start seeing something strange. So what happened? Now this is what we have to analyze. Okay, so basically what happens is that is that something very different happens with string type. Okay, so if I try to run, of course, my language server has already given me the error, but if I try to run it also, or I'll just build it. Okay, no need to run. Okay, cargo build, and I should get the error. And where is it? I'm getting it in the capital S. Okay, so let me do one. And open up a new terminal so that we can see all the error messages, because the output from previous error messages also comes. So, fine. So let username, so move occurs because username has type string which does not implement copy. Don't worry about this. We will be explaining this in great detail later on. Okay, we have a separate session on this whole concept itself. And we capitalize, so value moved here. So here it is satisfied. But so as far as this println statement is concerned, println macro call is concerned, it is fine. But the next println leads to this error, and it says here, okay, it says, hey, you know what? Basically, you have the value has been, value borrowed here after a move. So we have to understand the whole concept of borrow and move, which is what will be discussed in detail tomorrow. Okay, or the next session. So it says consider changing the parameter type in function capitalized to borrow instead of owning the value. Okay, right? So that is where this whole problem comes up. So this originates some blah 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 blah. So essentially, this really is the problem. Value borrowed here after move. This is called as move semantics, which we will discuss in great detail in the upcoming session. Okay. So essentially, you don't understand that this whole thing will work, but because string behaves in a very different way. So what is actually happening? Essentially, I'll just give you a gist of this. So when you pass the username, into the function, what happens is basically, there's a concept called ownership, which means that only one variable can have ownership of a certain value. Okay, and what value is that? Whatever value is there from the string which was created using this hard-coded string variable. Okay, so when you pass this username into the function, this variable name takes the ownership, and now what happens is basically ownership has changed. Username doesn't have any value associated with it. Okay, so basically the variable username has given its value over to the name. Now username doesn't have that value. That is the ABCD that we were talking about. Okay, so the ABCD string is there, right? So that ABCD string is the value of the variable username. So when the username is used in a function call, what happens is the username variable hands this value over to whatever variable is there sitting in the function. And so what happens is it has given away the value. The value has moved from username to the parameter name in the function. And so the username doesn't have any value associated with that. That's the reason why at this point, username doesn't hold anything. Value has already moved. This is the concept of ownership and borrowing. And we will be discussing this at length, okay, in the upcoming session, wherein this will become pretty clear to you. So as long as you are not, accessing username after the function call, you are good to go. But after the function call, if you try to do that, you will run into problems. Okay, so let's see. Can we overcome these errors by new name is assigned name or to uppercase? Well, no. So the way it works is completely different. Okay. So anyway, you will see this explained in greater detail in the upcoming session. Don't get confused. I'm just introducing you to the concept of ownership and borrowing, these terms. And in fact, this is one of the most important concepts you have to understand, because wherever you have functions, the ownership and borrowing will automatically come into play. And you have to be careful, because this is not how C, C++, Java, JavaScript, all these languages don't have this sort of behavior. So we will see where this ownership and borrowing comes into play, and you will see that in detail, because it actually requires a completely dedicated session on that. So we are going to have it in the upcoming session. It's dedicated for that. Okay. Okay, guys. So are there any other questions? Guys, please put up more questions. Okay. Okay, so from my side, for this session, that's all there is to it. Okay. I know you had some the video quality issues, so that we will address to it. So don't worry about that. Okay. I think probably it's because the whole point is that if you increase the resolution of the video, then it will become even slower. Okay. So, however, you will get access to all these on YouTube, so where you can actually watch it at the resolution that you want. Okay. Right. I see one more question. Is there any data type list that tuple dictionary? Okay. So I think, Bhuvan, your question is coming because of your understanding of Python, I guess. Okay. Right. Yeah, we do have, see, tuple we have already seen, okay? Tuple we have already seen, it is there. But the way you use tuples and lists, set, okay, so dictionary is nothing but actually a map, okay? The equivalent is map. All these data types are there as part of the REST library, okay? Not in the core language. So you can use all these types, okay? So from in the core language, you only have tuples and arrays. Okay, tuples are heterogeneous, arrays are homogeneous. Rest no other data types are there in the core language. All other data types are supported through the use of library. So I hope that answers the question. So hash mapping is, all these are available. So it is all available in the standard library. We have to import whatever types that we want, and then we can use them. Okay. All these are supported. But the syntax and semantics of them would be different from Python that you are actually used to. Okay. The usage is the same, but the way to use them, the syntax would be a little different. Okay, from what we are using. That's all there is. Hash mapping is similar to dictionary, right? Okay, so yeah, that is true. It is similar. Okay, but again, you see, the hash mapping or hashes and dictionaries are basically hashes, but you have different types of hashes. Okay, there's a whole assortment of hashes that is available. Okay, so it all depends upon language and its library. Okay. Okay, guys, so that's it from my side. So I think now it's time for our quiz. Okay.
Yes, it's that time of the hour now. Thank you so much, sir, for such an in-depth coverage of today's session. I think students would have been paying a little more attention than they would have yesterday after seeing the seriousness that we have put forth for the quizzes.
Yeah.
So Deepak, if we can go ahead with the link of the quiz. And so guys, another expert that we have, Mr. Deepak Chaudhary, who joined us yesterday, and he will be there with us for all the sessions also, has shared a link of Google form, which you will go use and start answering the questions like we did yesterday to all those who are new. So it's just a very simple process. You open the link, but remember that the email that you will type in there should be the same email through which you have registered for our IBC CEP. So make sure that you use that same email ID. Otherwise, we won't be able to track your progress, and we won't be able to know whether you have completed the quiz, or there would be a lot of confusion. So we won't be able to, I mean, that will create a confusion, which will in turn affect how we see your progress towards these sessions. So we can begin now. The quiz will be open for the next 20 minutes. So utilize the time nicely, and yeah, submit the quiz once. All the best, guys. If there are any questions regarding the quiz, please go ahead. Yes, Deepak, you want to add something?
Yeah. One more thing is that if you want to refer the codes which we have discussed throughout the session, you can go through this link. I'll paste in the chat box. You will get all the codes here session wise, like session 1 code is there. Likewise, we have session 2 functions. Yeah, you can get all the code here. Yeah, this is it.
So we have a question where Himija is saying that, sir, I just lost my registered email ID. Could I get it once, please? Sorry, I did not get the question. Can you
I think what the thing is, she doesn't remember the registered email ID during the registration process. The mail that was mail ID that was.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So can you just share? Let me just. How do I connect with you? Let me just check by your name. If we have an email ID, we'll try to find out, or else I will try to connect with you. Don't worry, we'll sort it out. Just confirm if you attended yesterday's session. Understood. Give us a moment. Yeah, Himaja, so I have responded to your query there. I've shared with you your email. I think that is the one. Just confirm once if that's accurate. Bharat and mine too. What's the doubt, Bharat? You also don't have the email. You attended yesterday's quiz, right? Bharat, what's the doubt exactly?